Chapter 16. Clara Astor, second princess of the Astorian Principality, watched the screens showing a live feed of what the scanners of Woodshaft were picking up as a very unfamiliar feeling coursed through her body. Fear. She knew very well what the Drazen were capable of. More than that, she'd had the immense displeasure of dealing with one of their diplomats years prior, and that was an experience she'd rather not reenact anytime soon. But Drazen raiders were, even by the low standards of the detestable aliens, scum through and through. The only reason they were not classified as pirates was because they never attacked the Drazen collective, as no Drazen faction or group was ever violent against their own species. "They prey on others since cannibalism doesn't work with them," she muttered to herself, her disgust showing. "A bloody shame that. Those damn plants would have gone extinct otherwise long ago." Uriel Holks replied to her comment as he stood next to her while under the presence of 4 Royal Marines. "Gotta say, I wasn't expecting you to spread your watchdogs like that, Princess. Not that I don't appreciate it, but 6 Royal Marines won't do much against thousands of Drazen pouring into my home in search of meat to grind and tear. You ain't like other nobles or like I expected royals to act like. Apologies." "I welcome it, Uriel. Not that I can fault you for having such a preconceived notion, given that you were a noble yourself. Nobles tend to be self-serving, arrogant, despotic, and prideful to a fault. Royalty can be worse, our history proves it. But some know their role and what their positions imply and demand of them," she replied, eyes narrowing bitterly. "Too few of them exist, sadly." "Far too few indeed, Princess," Uriel agreed. On the main tactical display screen, Woodshaft's fleet was already deployed and was safely circling the huge station within the protective bubble the defensive satellites and stations provided. It also showed the civilian ships, freighters and haulers mainly, burning away from the station whilst those already stuck here know it's too late to run away. Some armed freighters and gunships had joined the defensive fleet, adamant to at least provide some measure of support. "Has the population taken refuge?" Clara asked, impassive, yet internally concerned. "We don't have bunkers or safe houses other than this one," Uriel answered, eyeing around the well-defended, secluded room. "Everyone that can't fight worth a damn is hiding in their homes with barred doors. The rest are preparing to fight," he said, and the screen to the left showed the market area had transformed into a defensible position, with some defensive turrets and various palisades with people readying their weapons for the coming fight. "Woodshaft won't go down silently, I see. You were not boasting," Clara praised. "Will it be enough?" "Against the Drazen? Fat chance. We'll take down many of those monsters, but most of those people fighting for their lives aren't soldiers. Do you know what the martyr protocol is?" Uriel asked, lips pursed. Clara nodded. "I'm afraid that will be a constant during this battle, especially where my men are not present. Better to die on your terms than being taken alive by those things. I wonder how many will actually pull the trigger on themselves, though. If they like you, you'll be cattle. If they don't, you'll be food. Guess that's all the good I can say about the damn Drazen. They don't like wasting time or food. To be kept captive as mere cattle, forced to breed and to know your offspring will know no other life, always being aware that you'll see them die or have them watch you being devoured by your masters? I could imagine few fates worse than that, my dear Uriel." "Then let's make sure they don't get their stalks on you, Princess. They aren't stupid animals. When they figure out who you are, they'll ask for a hefty ransom numbering tens of thousands of lives," he growled, eyes narrowing. "Your life is too precious to be lost. A fair trade, most would say." "Most," Clara admitted. But she, personally, was not among those. Sadly, her duties as a princess demanded that she look for any alternative to stay alive and serve the principality, even if that meant sacrificing the lives of her subjects. She turned to watch Uriel's reaction when another screen switched from seeing a storage area sealing itself to a tactical display showing an approaching ship, a ship requesting permission to dock. Uriel's eyes went wide and she turned to Clara. "I believe you may want to answer this one, Your Highness," he said before a familiar voice cracked inside her helmet. "Your Majesty, Princess Clara, this is Captain Milcades reporting. I, alongside 7 of my men, have arrived following the orders of Lady Cynthia." "What are your orders?" he asked with a serious, firm, stoic tone that was so characteristic of the Royal Marines. Clara sighed internally, relieved to have 8 more Royal Marines on her side in command. "Captain Milcades, you and yours shall receive your orders soon. Dock quickly, we shall need your strength." "Understood, Your Majesty." With that, the connection ended. 8 additional Royal Marines are going to be a damn boon, that's for damn sure. "Any plans, Princess?" "I'll deploy them in key areas around the fortified areas. I'm certain the market area is going to be the one more heavily assailed," Clara replied firmly. "Keen eye there, Princess. Glad to see you got more bite than during talks," Uriel replied, smirking. "Is that not the deadliest battlefield of all?" Clara asked with mild humor. "Cynthia must be behind them and following closely. We will need every available body to be able to push back against the Drazen." "We sure will," Uriel agreed. "Ah, there they are. Look at that ship. Must be the one we detected since it is bleeding a mild amount of radiation," he said as a screen changed to show a barely visible black ship approaching the station in a deceleration course. "So those are the newest toys Duke Draymore got his hands on. Can't say I'm not envious. Should be docked in the next 5 minutes." "Any changes in the Drazen movements?" Clara asked, now put more at ease. "Nothing we can detect so far. I'm certain they already launched their boarding pods and perhaps some shuttles. Even for our scanners, they'd be hard to detect," Uriel answered. "Usual Drazen raiding tactic. Soften up the target before the ships arrive and clear away the resistance. They won't risk their precious cargo space unless absolutely necessary," he chuckled. "Have I told you I hate the Drazen? Who doesn't? Even at their most cordial, they don't care to show their disdain towards anyone, not them," Clara agreed. "It is a wonder why they haven't been eradicated. They may be monsters, but they keep to themselves most of the time. They barely avoid being a menace worth the resources." "Lucky shit stains," Uriel spat angrily. "The Principality is cursed for having to deal with them constantly. Not as bad as the Akanti hierarchy. Poor birds have it rougher than us," Uriel commented. "It is a shame that relations with the hierarchy are so poor. Otherwise, the Principality and the hierarchy could do significant damage to the collective and the Arabian Commonwealth. The foolishness of my ancestors and the elitism of most nobles have cost us much more than most realize," Clara lamented. "Perhaps," Uriel replied, shrugging. A couple of minutes passed in cold, tense silence until a screen showed the black ship docked with the station. "Shame we can't use that ship in battle. It doesn't look like it packs that much of a punch on its own, but I bet it could take down fighters and other small craft." Clara nodded. "When they attacked us in a pack, they were able to disable 2 of our ships before we could retaliate. Their cruiser class caused the most damage. Those ships were there as a screen," she confessed, seeing nothing wrong with telling him that much. "That would explain the explosion we detected. 13 hells. I saw it from an observatory deck when the light lag caught up with us. Amazing fireworks. What took it down? Sensors didn't detect anything until several smaller explosions presumably crippled it," Uriel asked curiously. Clara glanced at Uriel under her helmet and weighed her options before replying. "It was a joint effort for our fighters. They managed to predict its vector and ambushed it using tactical mines. The ship scuttled itself to avoid capture," she replied diplomatically. "I sure hope that commander got some credit for that kill. Bloody beautiful it was," Uriel said, chuckling. "Ah, connecting you with your watchdogs." "Appreciated," Clara replied. A second later she heard the voice of Captain Milcades. "Your Majesty, we are inside the station." "Orders?" he asked. "I'll send you the locations you are to reinforce and guard. Your orders are to eliminate any hostiles through any means necessary with extreme prejudice," she ordered, and sent the captain the points they were to be deployed in. "Captain, when can I expect Cynthia to arrive?" "Unknown, Your Majesty. Lady Cynthia sent us ahead to reinforce your position. Her intent is to catch the Drazen fleet by surprise and draw one of their ships away from Woodshaft to give us a better fighting chance," Milcades replied, already rushing toward his position. "Thank you, Captain," said the princess as her heart pounded in her chest. "There's no way Cynthia thought of that strategy herself. She's too rigid and unfit to command an entire vessel. She's not a glory seeker, and her priority has always been my protection." What caused her to decide that was the best option? She thought, imagining a dozen likely possibilities. "Captain, tell me, Do you know if she was persuaded to choose that decision? I do, Your Majesty. It was Lieutenant Wyatt Staples who convinced Lady Cynthia to engage the Drazen with the Noir Navio instead of joining us. A sound tactic, if I am allowed to say, Your Majesty, the captain replied. Under any other circumstances, she would have smiled at that and at the name Wyatt had picked for the ship. Instead, she sighed in relief. They do not plan to engage them head-on, do they? Unknown, Your Majesty. Lieutenant Wyatt Staples left the Noir Navio on a fighter before all contact was lost. Their whereabouts are unknown, Milcades replied. What? Clara exclaimed, shocked beyond belief. Wyatt left on his own? On a fighter? What is he? Why would Cynthia allow him to do such a stupid thing? Unknown, Your Majesty. All I received was that he left alone to plant an ambush on any possible Drazen invaders. A desperate measure, no doubt, the captain replied, as always, impassive. Cynthia, what were you thinking? What possessed you to allow him to leave? Clara screamed in her mind, unable to understand why her friend would let Wyatt do such a thing. What the bloody hell? Uriel said, before enhancing the tactical display screen to a point still over half the distance between the Drazen and woodshaft. Princess, you may want to watch this. Clara turned her attention to the screen and saw a single green dot moving fast through the screen as 30 red dots quickly approached the green dot. Wyatt! She half shouted, taking 2 steps forth, realizing she was seeing the death of the man who had saved her, Cynthia, Redford, and the rest of the tribulation aboard the Royal Favor. Wait, you know him? Is that your other bodyguard? He's a fighter pilot? Uriel asked, surprised at hearing so much emotion from the until then calm, collected, and cold princess. I sure hope he notices them in time. 1 fighter against 30? That's a death sentence. Yes. I know him. He's a man I owed my life to, Clara replied, dreadfully watching the green dot not diverting from its trail for seconds that stretched to eons. Then suddenly the green dot turned abruptly to face the red dots, charging madly at them. The dots clumped together more, ready to annihilate the offending enemy. No, Wyatt, what are you doing? Run away! She cried out, a hand involuntarily moving to the pouch in which her fighter model sat safely. That boy has a death wish, Uriel exclaimed. A raptor is meant to do quick strikes, disable ships, or plant ambushes. Dogfighting is the last thing it's meant to do. What is his major malfunction? His words died in his throat when all of a sudden the green dot seemed to almost come to an abrupt halt. Clara instantly identified it as a downward hard pull. At the speed Wyatt was moving, the G-forces and the strain on him, even with the dampeners, had to be agonizing at best. A second later, 23 red dots vanished from the screen. Before anyone could exclaim anything or even gasp, the green dot began to make quick, abrupt movements. 3 more dots vanished seconds later, then the remaining ones died one by one in quick succession until only the green dot remained. It stood almost idly in space for almost half a minute before it began to move towards open space. Clara's eyes were wide. Her mouth was hanging open, unable to comprehend what she had just witnessed. The speed, the maneuvers, and the implied G-forces all mixed in her mind, calculations running in the span of milliseconds. Even without her familiarity with fighters, she knew that no one short of a Royal Marine in terms of augmentations, gene therapy, and implants would come unscathed from that short engagement. In fact, she wasn't sure if a Royal Marine would come out uninjured from it. What the? He just became an ace 2 times over. Uriel found his voice, impressed. He turned to the princess with a smirk on his lips. Princess, wherever you found him, never let him go. That man just took out 30 Drazen fighters by himself in the span of 10 seconds. What house is he from? Calidor, Mittal, Fator, Renshine? Uriel asked, listing some of the most influential houses he knew about. He's not, Clara started, but stopped herself from saying anything else. Despite her racing heart, she managed to regain some of her composure. It matters not, Uriel. He has performed admirably. Beyond my expectations, far, far beyond. Keep your secrets then, princess, Uriel replied, crossing his arms as the screen zoomed out to its previous demonstration. Chatter is already flooding the comms. He's going to have many fans when he gets back, even though he's a noble. Looks like he's one with an actual head over his shoulders. Clara clenched her teeth and merely gave him a nod. Minutes passed, her eyes glued to the green dot moving until a much larger dot appeared, finally detected by the scanners as it moved toward the Drazen fleet in an intercept course. "That must be the other ship," Uriel commented. "Must be a nasty piece of work if it plans to stand up to the Drazen." He frowned as a snarl escaped his throat. "Boarding pods detected. The PD turrets are already firing at them. They won't take down many, but even one less counts." The screens around the main tactical display screen showed various points across Woodshaft. Clara watched as holes were breached and sealing foam formed against any entrance points. From one pod near the lounge area she had been sitting at before their arrival was detected, she saw a Drazan come out moving at blinding speed. The petals around its head flashed through several colors that looked beautiful before more of their kind exploded out. The Drazen were wearing combat armor that sealed most of their body. Their heads were enclosed in a see-through dome, while their arms and stalks moved freely. They charged quickly, spreading out as more and more pods made contact, unloading their cargo. On another screen, a group of 20 Drazen came face-to-face with a barricade manned by 7 guards. They opened fire upon the aliens and managed to take one down before they returned fire with laser weapons built into their suits. The brave men and women in that defensive position lasted for 20 seconds, killing 2 more Drazan before being overwhelmed and killed. Unlike Principality propaganda that painted Drazen raiders as little better than bloodthirsty animals unable to pass on a mean, the Drazen ignored the bodies, knowing they could collect them later. The reason they preferred laser weapons was simple. They were usually lighter, easy to wield, and they seared any wounds caused to their feed, preventing them from losing as much food as possible. Across the station, the situation repeated, with only a handful of places not heavily fortified withstanding the assault of the ravenous aliens. The first Drazen group of around 30 came face-to-face with the first Royal Marine guarding the entrance to the market area and leading over 100 people in the defense. The Royal Marine opened fire with deadly precision, and 5 Drazan died before they could scurry to cover. A firefight broke out, and more Drazan moved fast to reinforce their brethren. As more Drazan arrived, now easily counting over 3,000 across Woodshaft and quickly invading the least defended sections, the fights became more prevalent, and soon all fortified areas were seeing action. A position was overwhelmed, and the Royal Marine guarding it bolted and ran to the next position down the line, leaving the few survivors to die. To some, that would seem cruel or cowardly. To the Royal Marines, it was logical. Why die futilely when they could retreat to a more advantageous position? Their thought process was coldly pragmatic, after all. On and on it went, some positions held for a wave or two before being overrun or abandoned in favor of a tactical retreat. But slowly but surely, the Drazen, now numbering close to 5,000, were gaining terrain and were now facing the 4 most heavily defended positions: the main anchorage and docking station, the market area, the main living and residential area, and the hydroponic and aquaponic gardens. Behind those areas stood the main generators, the reactors, the command center, the armory, and the vast storage areas and warehouses. Uriel and Clara watched as 5 Royal Marines defending the residential area charged at no less than 70 Drazan, engaging them in close combat while the guards and the hastily built militia retreated past a choke point. The Royal Marines powered their swords and began to cleave carnage amongst the Drazen. The aliens flailed their arms and stalks with rapid movements, each one of their limbs acting as whips. But the Royal Marines danced, weaved, and dodged around their quick movements, cutting them in twain with brutal, deadly efficiency. The massacre lasted mere seconds, but when it was over, the Drazen were dead, and the Royal Marines retreated, with only one of them showing a significant wound on his now limp left arm. A nasty gash revealed a Drazan managed to pierce his shoulder, tearing through his armor after his shields were depleted. And yet, he moved as if the wound wasn't there. One Royal Marine guarding the entrance to the hydroponic garden wasn't so lucky. Alone, he stood against 100 Drazan that had managed to corner him. He charged at the aliens and, showing the fullest of his abilities, cleaved through the enemy with deadly precision and single-minded slaughter. But he was alone and was eventually overpowered, and a stalk pierced his helmet from front to back, killing him in the act. Clara clenched her teeth when the Drazen, enraged at having lost 32 of their numbers to a single human, proceeded to mutilate his corpse to the point that even they would have a hard time making use of it. "Seems like those carrion feeders are not beyond anger," said Uriel, sweat coming down his forehead. The strain of commanding the defense of his station directly weighed on him. "Casualties?" Clara asked. "Over 1,000 already. Your boys are putting the hurt on them, but I don't think it'll be enough to hold the rest of those bastards when they arrive after beating the fleet and the satellites to scrap. I sure hope the prince manages to get to them before they overwhelm all sections," Uriel said and let out a strained huff. "Same goes for your Winfield friend. If she manages to distract at least one of their destroyers, it'll be a lot of help," he finished with a chuckle. Clara silently agreed. The situation was manageable despite the grim reality that was encroaching upon them. In the security of the sealed command room they were currently at, it was highly unlikely that the Drazen would manage to get to them before being repelled, or getting as many prisoners as possible for their horrid purposes. How long has this siege lasted? Clara asked herself after realizing she had lost herself in the carnage and the defense of Woodshaft. Captain Milcades hadn't contacted her again, which was a good sign that he had everything under control. For now. Her eyes drifted to the tactical display screen and saw that the Drazen fleet was almost upon them. In 20 minutes, they would be within the maximum range of the defense satellites, and the hectic space battle would follow. She also noted that the Noir Navio was also close to the Drazen fleet, still undetected. Abruptly, the green dot representing the Noir Navio accelerated, more than duplicating its speed. But something was off. She could see it. The ship was not only accelerating, but now the scanners were also detecting a steady heat buildup. Cynthia hadn't shared with her all the specifics of the ship since she had to focus on breaking through the encryption, but she knew enough about it to know it was powerful. But why would Cynthia, straightforward as she is, blatantly reduce her stealth capabilities? Unable to answer that question, she watched the screen to see what she would do next. The scanners worked with FTL transmissions and receivers, cutting as much as possible the lag between what she was seeing and what was happening out there. "Let's see what your Guardian can do, Princess," Uriel said, as the display zoomed in on the Noir Navio and the Drazen fleet. One single large green dot against 3 similarly sized dots and 2 larger ones, all together forming a pentagon formation. Suddenly, a deluge of small explosions erupted across the nearest of the smaller red dots. A few seconds later, more explosions happened, and the dot began to move in an intercept course against the Noir Navio. Then the ship accelerated more and veered, changing direction in a maneuver that few ships could match at that speed, and less so do it so quickly. The wait was eternal as she watched the Drazen destroyer approach the Noir Navio steadily and with deadly intent. A minute later, however, something seemed to stagger the destroyer as the Noir Navio accelerated again and made a hard turn to port. Her eyes widened when she noticed the trap play out. The Drazen destroyed kept moving, but now was directionless, spinning in space as the scanners detected its heat signature rapidly decreasing. Uriel Holtz let out a huge sigh of relief. "She managed to take it out," he said, hardly believing what he was seeing. "That's one less ship to worry about and one less problem for the prince to handle. You have a terrific guardian, Princess. Now that that's done, she should turn to run away and remain hidden." "I don't think that's Cynthia at the helm," Clara muttered to herself, realizing that the tactic was oddly familiar to what a fighter pilot would do in a dogfight. Before any of them could make another mention, they watched as the Noir Navio didn't peel away to remain hidden. Instead, it slowly corrected its course to face the rest of the Drazen fleet, charging almost directly at the nearest cruiser while both cruisers unloaded dozens upon dozens of fighters in a swarming tactic. Each beat of her heart pounded against her ears as she watched the green dot approaching with almost reckless abandon at the enemy. Then suddenly, the nearest red dot visibly decelerated. 5 seconds later, the second red dot vanished, taking every other tiny red dot that surrounded it. "I want a view of that location immediately, maximum zoom," Uriel cried out as another screen changed from the defense of the market area to a view of empty space. The camera zoomed in to maximum, and for the first time since their arrival, the Drazen ships were visible as grainy, barely distinguishable forms coursing through space. "They're still at 10 million kilometers out. They'll be here in 10 to 15 minutes at their current speed. The light lag should be around 31 seconds to reach us here, but the zoom should see what happened about, Clara began, but was cut off when a faint but deadly stream of blue energy impacted the second Drazen cruiser. 2 seconds later, it exploded. Uriel Holks was open-mouthed, watching the destruction of a Drazen cruiser, unable to form a single word for the longest time. That surely pissed them off. "Wyatt," Clara muttered softly, smiling and pressing a hand against her figurine as the feed died. Focusing once more on the tactical display, she saw that the Noir Navio was already peeling away. The heat signatures were slowly dying down, and it had decelerated by a significant margin for some reason. The ship changed paths and moved on a course that put it away from Woodshaft. The Drazen would not have it, and quickly moved into an intercept vector, hoping to catch the Nornavio before it could escape. One ship had been crippled, another was destroyed, and now the rest of the fleet was moving away from their main objective, buying precious time for the defenders to last and for the prince to arrive in time. The Drazen fighters moved in quickly to swarm the Nornavio, giving chase. Clara expected Wyatt to do something against the fighters now, but the ship kept running away, never accelerating past its current speed. The Drazen ships wouldn't be able to catch them at that speed, but if the fighters managed to cripple the ship or slow it enough, they'd be at their non-existent mercy. And yet, nothing significant happened. A red dot vanished every now and again after being hit by a missile, but nothing more than that until the fighters caught up to the Noir Navio and its PD turrets became effective. She was certain that Wyatt wouldn't commit to a mere diversory tactic, no matter how much every gained second meant. "Something's wrong," she muttered, dreading that the crew Wyatt had spared had committed treason, or that something worse had happened. "Are they still chasing us?" Cynthia asked, as most of her attention was focused on Wyatt. Half an hour had passed since the pilot lost consciousness, and the Drazen were stubbornly chasing them. Either Wyatt managed to anger them greatly and now sought to kill them, or they were so confident that their assaulting forces would capture the station that they decided to eliminate the unforeseen threat the Noir Navio represented. "Yes, their fighters are closing in en masse. They're starting to overwhelm the PD turrets that can target them," Galt answered. "Missile pods 1 through 6 are ready to fire. We just need to lock targets, ma'am." "Not yet. The closer they get, the better our chances to take them down. How many fighters are following us?" Cynthia replied, as she internally cursed that Wyatt's armor was standard and thus lacked the means for her to monitor his vitals directly. The bleeding had stopped, and she could see the nanites spreading across his body thanks to the grayish tinge around his neck, eyes, and lips. He was still alive, breathing, and she could feel his pulse. Weak, but it was there. "Lady Cynthia, the jamming and scrambling signals of the Drazen have been losing their effectiveness slowly after the destruction of their first cruiser. We cannot establish contact with Woodshaft or the Prince, but our sensor field has been significantly expanded. It would seem Woodshaft is under siege." "Orders, Lady Cynthia?" a Royal Marine asked, impassive and serious. "Common Drazen raiding tactic. Even if we head over to the station, we won't be able to do much. The rest of the Drazen fleet is focused on destroying us after Wyatt's actions. Every moment we keep the bulk of their remaining forces away from Woodshaft and focused on us is far more helpful than the little aid we could provide on the ground," she replied, mirroring Wyatt's reasoning and seeing that he had spoken true. "We shall continue and avoid making any harsh course corrections. Galt, how many fighters are you detecting?" "We are detecting over 400 fighters. I didn't know those monsters were capable of fielding so many fighters into a ship that's not a dedicated carrier," he replied swiftly. "Now I am far more grateful that the lieutenant managed to destroy one of those cruisers. Drazen raiding ships are a mix between a warship and a cargo hauler. Also, they can fit more of their precious feed inside their ships. Most patrol fleets would stand no chance against a fleet like the one we're facing. It truly speaks to the power of this ship. Tell me, Galt, was Samuel Caiston a talented captain?" "He was, Lady Cynthia. Only his cousin, Lord Andrew Caiston, is said to surpass him in intellect and skills," Galt replied. "I believe he had many medals and commendations under his name. Which ones, I know not." Cynthia absorbed his words and mused them for a moment. She wasn't a shrewd politician like Clara, nor was she comparable to her sister's commanding talent and expertise. But she was no moron either. Lengthy meetings, hearing, and aiding her friend had taught her a thing or two. What do you think he would have done in our place? Run away and retreat as his orders demanded, Galt replied, then grimaced. And even without them, I believe he would have retreated or remained hidden regardless. He was an ambitious man and wished to further his standing within House Cayston and in the eyes of Duke Draymore, no doubt. Cynthia frowned slightly. The way Galt spoke of the late Samuel Cayston indicated a measure of respect, but no fondness nor familiarity. Were you not his underling before obtaining this ship? Heavens, no. I operated as a lieutenant commander on the 3rd Fleet, 1st Patrol. Specifically, the APNV Grace of Divination, a battle cruiser. Galt paused for a moment, fingers moving across his terminal. Score 3 hits, he announced with a nervous sigh. I met Lord Samuel 6 months ago and was placed under his command before the ship was delivered to him. Cynthia felt a wave of dread wash over her as a question ran through her mind. How many ships like the Noir Navio, or worse, ships more powerful than it are at Duke Draymore's disposition? Thanks to Wyatt's ambush, they didn't find out the true capabilities of the cruiser, but judging by the battle, it was easy to conclude that the stealth cruiser was inferior to the Noir Navio. Do you believe he would have performed well in combat? Comparing his by-the-book attitude and honoring the rules of engagement to what I've witnessed so far, he would have commanded this vessel in actual combat gallantly but ineffectively. I have never seen a man command a ship with such ferocity and trickery. The lieutenant exploited his advantages well, and he didn't make use of all his weaponry. I wonder why he didn't. Regardless, I believe Lord Samuel would have been hard-pressed to even disable the destroyer during the same circumstances, Galt explained truthfully. Then he gazed upon the unconscious man. Lady Cynthia, if I may be so bold, will he survive? I plan to make him survive. Lieutenant Wyatt Staples, proved himself reliable before, then he proved his worth and talent as a pilot. Now I doubt my princess, nor the prince for that matter, will allow his life to go to waste, Cynthia replied, relieved that Wyatt's pulse felt stronger than before. Galt's words gave her a moment's pause, though. He's correct in his assumption about Wyatt's approach to combat. What was he planning on doing next? Was powering all weapons, blatantly giving away his position through heat built up part of his strategy? It worked against the crippled destroyer, and the way he assaulted the Drazen confounds me so. He went in for the kill, no glory whatsoever, and he laughed so boisterously when the cruiser was destroyed. Uncouth, yet relatable given the enemy we're facing. No commanding officer should showcase such glee so openly. For that matter, most admirals and other high-ranking Navy personnel would never be so bold as to strike at the Drazen so brazenly unless they were to command a heavy assault patrol. Her thoughts came to an end when she heard the red-haired man release a restrained sigh. Then I shall pray for his well-being. Lady Cynthia, the fighters are nearly within effective range lock. Missile pods are loaded and we are ready to perform quick-fire reloading if need be, Galt announced. Do not burn yourself unless necessary. Reload at regular speed. When ready, lock onto the nearest fighters. 3 missiles for each fighter and open fire freely. After that, repeat the volley. Take down as many of those murderous plants as possible, she ordered. Firing, Galt announced. A minute of tense silence followed before he spoke again. 6 volleys fired and proved to be largely ineffective. Drazen fighters countered with missiles of their own and flares. Only 11 fighters were destroyed. Shall we fire again? They seem to be unable to lock onto us. Keep firing as long as they are within lock range. Either they shall run out of flares and intercept missiles of their own, or will inflict so many casualties that they will give up the chase, Cynthia ordered. Another long, tense minute went by until a voice spoke up. Lady Cynthia, a Royal Marine announced, ships have been detected at the edge of our sensors. It appears to be His Majesty's fleet set on a course to Woodshaft. The Drazen fleet has broken chase and appears to be disengaging entirely. Confirmed, Lady Cynthia. Drazen fighters are disengaging and peeling away, Galt informed, relieved. Cynthia allowed herself a sigh of relief, but she wasn't one to fall into complacency. Slowly turn away from the Drazen and set a course to Woodshaft. If the plants wish to run, then let them. We have achieved victory for now, but it won't be a complete one until the Drazen leave the system or they are hunted down. What else can go wrong? The prince asked himself as he stared at the black monitors before him. We barely escaped the clutches of my uncle. We managed to elude capture and escape to fringe territories by keeping a low profile and gathering loyalist forces in the process. He hummed deeply. Only for those black ships to appear, we suffered an ambush that reduced our already weakened fleet, and now Drazen raiders. If Clara is captured, we can negotiate. If she dies, this conflict will only escalate out of my control. Cynthia will not allow harm to come to her, my prince, Juliana replied as she and Redford stood at each side of the blond man, bearing the burden of the entire principality on his shoulders. Nor shall my royal marines. If House Caiston is involved in this assault, I implore you, my liege, to cast them out and exterminate their bloodline. For no other punishment shall suffice. Conjoining with that filth, words fail me to describe the ire I am experiencing and their vile treason. It is beyond what I can fathom, Redford said, glaring at empty space. Let us not jump to conclusions so hastily, Redford. You were the one that taught me to think with a cool head and seek out the truth before coming to a rash decision, did you not? The prince said, his voice cold and focused. Rest easy, for I shall not stay my hand if proof arises that House Caiston summoned these raiders regardless of their intent. He clenched his hands into shaky fists and narrowed his eyes. If they are guilty, they shall answer not only for putting the life of my sister in jeopardy, but the blood of thousands shall be on their necks. As much as I detest these honorless traitors, I hold on to the slim chance that they are innocent. Willingly setting anyone, human or not, to suffer the fate that the Drazen hold is an act of treason against your species and sapience as a whole. No mercy must be awarded to such criminals, Juliana stated coldly, voice shaking with barely contained anger. Redford, do you have any guess as to the size of the raider fleet? To be able to disrupt our communications and sensors to this extent, and taking into account the size, power, and population of Woodshaft, I believe that we may face anything ranging from 4 to 7 ships. The warp signature we detected was large, so those ships arrived closely together. It is more than likely that there is at least one cruiser class at their disposal. Probably 2, Redford replied. My prince, I request permission to send boarding parties to Woodshaft before the Drazen begin their assault in full. By now, they surely have sent their vanguard troops to soften up the defenses and disable automated defenses, Juliana asked seriously. Until we have a clear visual confirmation of the station, I shall not allow you to leave. Captain Milcades and the rest of the Royal Marines shall buy us some time, the prince replied without looking at his 2 most trusted commanders. My greatest priority is to ensure the survival of the fleet and myself. Everything else is secondary, even my sister's survival. Clenching his teeth in impotence, he took a deep breath before continuing. Redford, are your fighters ready for departure? Yes, my liege. Our losses were regrettable, and we have a shortage of pilots. Across our fleet, I can only field a full Talon, Redford replied obediently. If I may, my prince, I wish to lead this Talon in person. I, too, am a fighter pilot. Without access to our long-range communicators, my capabilities as a commander shall be limited. It shall be a pitched battle against their fighters first, but if we coordinate correctly, we can overcome their numerical superiority. I forbid it, the prince said in no uncertain terms. I need you at my side, Redford. Besides, your children and your wife would not forgive me if I allowed you to die such a needless death. As you command, my liege, Redford retorted. Do you wish me to deploy my fighters? Have them on standby. They shall be deployed at the same time as the boarding pods and shuttles. Their objectives shall be harassing and supportive actions. Leave the main fleet alone and let the joint forces of Woodshaft and my fleet scatter the Drazen and force them to retreat. With any luck, they shall be content with a meager capture of their precious feed and decide that facing more of our forces is not worth the risk, the prince said firmly. Juliana, if Cynthia were to perish in the defense of Clara, I assure you, she will be granted the highest of honors once my uncle is dealt with. She's a Winfield, my prince. She shall do her duty. Serving the just and rightful House Astor is our greatest honor, always have been, always will be. Juliana replied, giving the prince a soft smile. "Loyalty is its own reward." "Indeed," said the aged commander. "Fret not, my prince. Your uncle failed to capture you twice, failed to capture or eliminate Clara, and has failed to eliminate you through underhanded means if this Drazen assault is of Casten make. We may not know what happened to Princes Giovanni and Alexander, but as long as you are free and able to fight for your rightful throne, we shall strive onwards, my liege. Your confidence and trust in me reassure me, Redford. You served my father proudly, and now you serve me with that same unquestionable diligence. He would be pleased," the prince said, giving the gray-haired man a faint appreciative smile. Several minutes passed in relative silence as the weight weighed upon them. Suddenly the prince stiffened. "Speak, Admiral," he said, receiving a direct message from Admiral Damien. Opening a link with Redford and Juliana, the three heard the Admiral's words intently. "My liege, my comm officers have confirmed that the intensity of the Drazen jammers and scramblers has reduced by a considerable margin. It is not enough to enable long-range communications, but our sensor sweep area has been increased substantially. We are detecting woodshaft within sensor range, and I can confirm that it is under siege, and a small defensive fleet has been deployed and is protecting woodshaft. However, most curiously, there are no signs of enemy ships near the station," Admiral Damien reported. "Where are they, then?" "Those monsters wouldn't let up a prized hunting ground without any good reason," Redford said, frowning deeply. "I can't be sure, Commander Redford, but sensors are detecting a barely perceptible signature at the edge of our current capabilities. 3 ships. No, wait, there's a 4th heat signature moving away from the rest of the ships. Its vector indicates that is moving away from woodshaft with no clear destination in mind." The Admiral paused for a moment, then in a more serious tone continued. "My liege, if I am correct, the leading vessel is a black ship. I can't detect the mass of the object, only a faint heat signature. The other 3 ships are Drazen-made." "A black ship running away from their allies?" the prince asked out loud before anyone could jump to conclusions. "Why would the Drazen obey prey? Is it possible that this black ship is fighting them?" Redford crossed his arms. "A most probable scenario, my liege. If the aliens diverted their attention from their main goal to deal with a single ship, then that gives us time to bring aid. Juliana, you have my permission to go. Send in your Marines and boarders. Lead the assault and take 10 of our remaining Royal Marines as your escort and elite assault unit. The remaining 10 Royal Marines shall be more than enough to protect me. Support Woodshaft, save as many as you can, and rescue our sisters. Burn those abominations to ash," the prince ordered. "My prince!" Juliana saluted, turned, and quickly made her way out of the war room. "Redford, send out your fighters to the black ship. It must be the one that escaped the battle. Order your fighters to disable or cripple it if they refuse to surrender." The prince paused. "On second thought, Redford, lead them, but avoid fighting yourself. I need someone I can trust completely to act as my eyes, ears, and voice involving the chance to capture such a vessel." "I hear and I obey, my prince. It shall be done," Redford replied, saluting and then moving to leave. "I shall return to you, my liege." As Redford left, the prince turned around again, his attention on the black screens. A second later, a rough depiction of the Exalted Virtue's tactical display appeared on it. He focused on it for what felt like forever as he watched his ragtag fleet approaching Woodshaft at a steady pace. He received a near-simultaneous report that both Juliana and Redford had left the Exalted Virtue to fulfill his orders. A chime alerted him that someone was outside the door and wished to enter. Connecting to the surveillance system, he saw that Lukacs Ishtal was standing outside the room, while 5 Royal Marines wearing their regular combat armor guarded each side of the hallway. 2 of them moved to flank Lukacs. With a thought, he opened the door. "My prince, I bring news regarding our problem regarding the traitors among our numbers," Lukacs said firmly. The prince turned to face the dignified, slim, tall, blond man and studied his expression for a split second. He was as focused as always, but his eyes, despite cybernetic, revealed he had something serious to tell him in person. "Leave us," he commanded, and the 2 Royal Marines left without fail. "Speak, Lukacs." "My prince, the QEC has been found," Lukacs revealed without hesitation. "I could not entrust the network with such information. I had to come and inform you personally of this development." The prince nodded, his expression impassive and forever dignified. Internally, he was both disappointed and angered at the same time. Hoping against hope, he held to the chance that such a thing wasn't possible. But now that he heard confirmation that there were traitors among his closest loyal subjects, he didn't know which emotion was stronger. "Show it to me," he commanded. "My liege," Lukacs replied, saluting. The wood was hard but familiar. The bark had many splinters, and the edges could cut anyone that didn't know how to handle the small piece of wood currently in his hand. It had a healthy brown exterior and a reddish, opaque core. It was simple, yet beautiful to behold. A contrast to the danger the piece of wood projected even after being chopped down. But to Wyatt, the feeling of the wood was familiar and brought with it a strange sense of comfort. Nodding to himself, he sat back on his chair and picked up a knife before beginning the long, dull process of giving it shape. Carving wood by hand was time-consuming, but it helped him relax after a long day of study and work. Living on the outskirts of the city had its benefits, such as the beautiful view of the forest in the distance contrasting the city behind him and the orbital launch station just beyond the horizon in the other direction. The sun was setting, giving a beautiful blue, orange, red, and violet sunset that contrasted against the slowly darkening sky and the emerging stars visible through the light pollution of the city. He could already hear the ferchatas singing their nightly song. "Heh, annoying little buggers," he whispered to himself as the knife moved with practiced ease across the piece of wood he was holding, each strike sending a thin sheet of discarded bark or wood onto the floor. The distant chirp of a clicksall caught his attention, reminding him that mating season was starting for the annoying, deadly birds. Inside his home, he could hear his father tinkering away inside his garage with Wham helping him. They loved fixing and repairing commonplace appliances. A much cheaper alternative over buying a new one, and many commoners and some poor low-tier nobles went to him to save a few credits. Despite being an electrical engineer and earning a good salary, his father's love for tinkering and fixing things never failed to make him smile. He once tried his hand at it and found out he was no good whatsoever. He had an eye for detail, but he couldn't fix anything worth a damn even with his father guiding him. Instead, he turned to work at a local wood processing factory. The pay was fair most of the time, and he could take discarded pieces for himself without any issue. Plus, it granted him a standard record of compliance, obedience, and work hours necessary to apply for entry to the academy, alongside a good score in his studies. The academy. His eyes drifted to the stars above, wishing to be there someday. "Are you seriously going to do it, Wyatt?" The voice of his first younger brother, Weskel, brought his attention back down, and he turned to see his brother, almost a copy of himself, except that his eyes were like their mother's, yellow instead of brown. He was wearing leather armor with a rifle hanging from his shoulder. A dozen long, bright green feathers decorated his belt proudly. Wyatt whistled. "A dozen of them? You got lucky," Wyatt replied as his hand kept carving away. "More like the cheeky things got too hungry. It was a good day, yeah. Scope and drop. Clicksall chicks are an easier target than their parents," Weskel said, proud of himself. "Are you going to answer my question?" "Didn't hear you arrive," Wyatt deflected. "I saw you daydreaming from down the lane, Wyatt, so you really gonna do it, huh?" Weskel insisted. Wyatt shrugged. "I don't see why I shouldn't. I'm not particularly good at anything, and we both know I have a knack for piloting." "Yeah, but why risk your life and leave us, bro? You're an even better shot than I am. You could easily become a Clicksall hunter like me and become a ranger. You'd be set for life." Another cry from a Clicksall off in the distance interrupted him. With a chuckle, he continued. "Not like we're ever going to get rid of those pests. Better for me. More Clicksall, better pay." "That's your calling, Wes." "Mine is up there," Wyatt replied, pointing to the sky with his knife. "I want to see what's out there, serve the Principality, and protect it and its people." "I know," Weskel replied, unflinching his rifle and sitting next to his brother as he returned to carving. "Dad doesn't want you to go. Wham thinks you're so cool. And Mom? You know she cries at night when she thinks we can't hear her, right?" "Yeah, I know," Wyatt replied, his expression dropping slightly. "Those that leave rarely survive long-term, and even fewer return. But if I complete my service with honors and distinction, I'll get lifelong standing, steady income, and a comfortable life. When I'm back, if they're still alive, I'll be able to take care of Mom and Dad for the rest of their lives." It's not much, but it is the best I can do. Or you could end like Mr. Warlow, ranting all day about blue bloods. The two shared a hearty chuckle. When it ended, a few seconds of silence passed between them, with only the knife scraping against wood joining the Furchada's serenade. You could, stay and not risk your life like that, Westcall insisted. Please, Wyatt, you could join the diplomatic corps or something. We're commoners. We can't aspire to much. We're not at the bottom rung. Our standing is enough to grant us a nice living. I know, but I need to go up there, Wyatt replied, smiling softly. Mom asked you to try and convince me? Dad, Westcall replied, sighing. I'm going to miss you, Wyatt. All of us will, he added. Wyatt stopped his wood carving and set his tools aside. Then he rubbed Westcall's head. He was only 12, but he was already more mature than he was. You'll be a proper hunter once you turn 16. I bet you'll become a ranger in less than 5 years, Wes. I hate it when you do that, Westcall replied, but didn't stop his older brother. Why, you're not, doing it just because you want revenge? Wyatt stopped rubbing his little brother's head, but looked at him reassuringly. I'll happily kill any Drazen I come across. Same goes for pirates, but I won't plan to go out there to do that, Wes. I genuinely want to see the universe and serve the Principality. Revenge is the last thing on my list, Wyatt replied, then returned to his carving. I'm going to miss you all, too. I'll write as often as I can. You know how expensive messages can be. Westcall nodded, offering his big brother a sincere, toothy grin. Just promise you won't get yourself killed, all right? Pain. World-shattering pain coursed through his body, yanking him away from a bittersweet memory, the day before he went to enlist in the academy. His eyes shot open, but his vision was blurry and tinged with red and black. He tried to scream, but he couldn't do it. His chest hurt, his ribs hurt, his head hurt. Everything hurt in a way he had never experienced before. At best, he could gurgle and cough bloody spittle as he heard his bones crack. His instincts overtook him, and he tried to flee from the pain, but he couldn't move. He was tightly strapped to something. Something was preventing him from moving. He could hear noises, but couldn't see who or what was making them. He cried openly, refusing to blink as the pain was too much, too intense. The pain suddenly stopped, and he went limp as his body trembled, while the death throes of the pain he had just endured lingered for long moments. His breathing was agitated, and it burned him. He was suddenly thirsty, very thirsty, and his vision returned to normal slowly. The white noise and the buzzing he was hearing also faded away, giving way to coherent noises he could identify and understand. Patient is stabilizing. Risk of cardiac arrest, 22% and decreasing. Internal bleeding, halted. Risk of cerebral hemorrhage, 11% and decreasing. Risk of death, low. Status, full recovery in 3 days. The monotone but oddly pleasant voice of a medical AI reached his ears. The urge and strength he felt when he desired to run away was gone, replaced by an incredible exhaustion. But he could move his eyes, and it wasn't long for him to decipher that he was inside a Medicare pod. Moments later, a figure wearing red armor and with blue hair stood next to him, and blue eyes looked down on him with a relieved expression. "See Cynthia?" he asked, barely making out her face through the blur that slowly went away from his eyes. Then, everything came back to him. Woodshaft, Clara's meeting, the assault on the Caiston station, the arrival of the Drazen, the battle. What happened? The Drazen— Remain calm, Wyatt, Cynthia said softly. After you passed out, we eluded the Drazen until they turned to flee. They are still moving away from the system. The prince moved to reinforce Woodshaft and save both Clara and the station. Thanks to you, those filthy creatures are now running away like the cowards they are. They left their people to die. Now they will be trapped between the defenders and the reinforcements. Good. That's good, Wyatt muttered, relieved and satisfied with the outcome. Rest, Wyatt. You've earned this respite, Cynthia remarked, offering him a sincere smile. Wyatt allowed darkness to claim him a second later.